All right. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to another One Art reading, the first of the new year. So happy New Year to all of you from One Art. Um, I was going to say before we begin, I'm going to let you know it's being recorded, but it's already being recorded. So um, if you don't know already, One Art is an online poetry journal that publishes daily, hopefully continues to be daily. Um, a not I don't know why am I saying this? A not open secret is that I am increasingly being hard on people, especially people that I know their potential and ability, and uh, and so it is getting harder and harder to get into the journal. So the frequency of the journal publication does in fact relate to how much amazing poetry that is sent our way, of which there is an abundance. One Art receives somewhere between 15 and 50 submissions per day. And that does vary day to day, but it is quite a lot of submissions. So hopefully the journal continues to be daily. But if it doesn't, it's just because I'm being, a difficult gatekeeper and people can blame me. So that's a really weird way to introduce. So I'm going to move on now. So thank you all for being here and for supporting One Art, and to all of our amazing contributors and our wonderful readers today. Um, Thank you and welcome. So I want to mention a few things just because usually I would do it at the end, but I feel like while people trickle in, it's good if I just mention now. That we do have a couple upcoming things for One Art. So, tentatively, we're going to try to do a monthly reading and a monthly workshop. This is sort of to be determined. So, nothing is set in stone at the moment for February or upcoming, but I'm working on it. And I'm sort of obsessive about the pairings. So, um, kind of like, Taylor Swift with like adding Easter eggs to her albums. So these are all very purposeful reading combinations. So feel free to think really hard about it. But I do really take a lot of effort in trying to put together lineups that I feel like are meaningful and people that complement each other well. So tentatively, there's going to be a workshop on Sunday, February 9th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. However, this is not completely set in stone yet because I'm not sure that all of the readers who I want to be together at that reading will be available. Um, we also have two upcoming workshops in the coming months. One of them is a makeup because we had to change the date. This is with Nicole Caruso Garcia, who was going to be doing a workshop called Stealth Formalism, Avoiding the Pitfalls of Formal Verse. And we went back and forth about this a little bit. So initially we didn't want to, confuse people about it being like just for free verse poets, or that somehow we might be explaining how to write formal verse in a time period of 2 hours, because that would be impossible. So the subtitle is Avoiding the Pitfalls of Formal Verse. So at least in part, it's sort of the errand, I suppose, is to make formal verse sound more natural or organic. So I'm really hoping that a lot of free verse poets will sign up for that one. Um, and, people that write formal as well. But for those who have experimented with formal verse, obviously free ver free verse, verse Libra is itself a form, but we don't really think of it that way. But working with constraints, tends to produce good work. So um, constraints, I would say, are underrated. And the other workshop will be with Gloria Heffernan, and this is going to be called, I saw Rosemary's excitement there. Gloria's workshop is called Crossing Thresholds and is on the subject of poetry and mindfulness. And so these are going to be, to be determined dates And I'll also be, looking into more scheduled workshops and readings. I know that was kind of a lot. Okay, so now on to the reading. Today, we are pleased to have three amazing poets and writers with us, Ona Gritz, Heather Swan, and Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer. These are three of one of most decorated poets, certainly with regards to their integral role in the fabric of one art's community in terms of presence, voice, and setting a high bar for excellence. There is good reason why we've nominated all three poets for well-regarded prizes such as the Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net. Our first reader is Ona Gritz. Ona is a poet who I've known for quite a little while now. Ona is author of Geode, a Main Street Rag poetry book, award finalist of On the Whole, a story of mothering and disability. Ona's poems have appeared in Ploughshares, River Teeth, the Bellevue Literary Review, Catamaran Literary Reader, and in 2020, she won the Poetry Archive Now Wordview 2020 project. And her new memoir, Everywhere I Look, which is incredible, won the Reader's Choice Gold Award for Best Adult Book, the Independent Author Award in Nonfiction, and the Independent Author Award in True Crime, and is an Independent Book Review 2024 must-read. With regards to one art, we nominated Ona's poem Office Visit for the Pushcart Prize in 2022. In 2023, we nominated her poem Dear Advice Columnist for Best of the Net. In the first year of One Art's publication, we nominated Ona's Notice Breath for the Pushcart Prize. And Ona has consistently been among One Art's most read poets since the journal's inception. And now, Ona Gritz.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Mark, and for this invitation to read with such wonderful poets. Heather and Rosemerry, I'm so happy to be here with you. I'm going to read my one art poems with some other poems sprinkled in. So I'm going to start with a poem about the holiday season we just came from, that Mark was kind enough to give a home in one art. This is called December Again. December again, the radio given over completely to carols. My son complains, not everyone celebrates Christmas. We switched to CDs. Outside, Santa dances the twist in a storefront. All around us, the pine and lights. 2 weeks early, we bring out the menorah, read the Maccabees story, which of course he loves. We're underdogs, warriors. A miracle keeps the candles lit. He gets a present for every day that it lasts. How can a birthday of a long-gone rabbi compete with that? Still, I catch him looking with longing at those bejeweled trees suddenly everywhere. After all, he's 7, and he's not invited, and it's the biggest birthday party of the year. And this is Notice Breath, my pandemic poem. All of us have at least one, right? This is for my friend Julia. Notice breath, my yoga teacher says. It's the year of Corona, and I take her class in New Jersey from my house across state lines. And what I notice today is the lovely unspecificity, not notice my breath or hers, just breath itself, moving, unhitched, animating each of us. One friend with the virus describes a burning like inhaled chemical fumes. Another, a pressure like a cheetah, chose her rib cage as a place to rest. So yes, these days I notice breath, the way you'd notice a bouquet on your scarred kitchen table. Gathered bursts so bright at first, it's easy to forget they've been clipped from their roots. They're fading not even all that slow. Mother's Day, I watched as 2 teenage girls sung a hip-hop love song to a masked and gloved woman on her porch. They stayed on the walk, and I on my side of the street. But when their song ended, the mom or aunt or favorite neighbor crossed the divide. took those girls in her arms, deciding the feel of their heat and heartbeats and sweat was worth daring the beast for once. Every day we're made to weigh it like that, sucking in our breath, letting it out against paper or cloth, noting its warmth as we do. This is office visit. Honeycombing, the doctor says, and for an instant I let myself rest in what I love about that word, sticky textured golden noun turned verb. But the world he's leading us through on the nightscape CT scan is inside you. The two crucial islands, your lungs. This, he tells us, is healthy tissue, dark sky barely flecked with stars. And this, tapping the line of a lacy shore, scars. I remember the first time I made out our boy's profile on a cloudy screen like this. Tiny nub of thumb between what would become his lips. Back then, I saw myself as standing on a precipice, knowing that when I dropped, I would fall toward life. But this, you and I, under the buzzing glare of such harsh light, it's life too, isn't it? I'm asking this of both of us. Stay. Notice the heat in our held hands. That poem was for Dan, as is this one. One of the many reasons I married you. Remember remember the boat my son built in his mind when he was 8, sturdy and seaworthy, though not with more than 2 people in it. Every few days he'd climb in, have us join him, and ask me to choose. What he didn't yet know is that I'm the daughter of a woman who gave up her children for a man with no place in the skiff of his heart for kids who weren't his. I will never be her, I told myself over and over. So whenever he asked, it was you I threw into the churning waters he imagined. And you, who as a boy his age nearly lost your life in a campside lake, drowned as often as you had to for him to feel safe. One of the pleasures of an opportunity like this is going through the archives and finding poems that you'd forgotten about. So this is a poem, an old poem that I've just rediscovered yesterday. And it's a form poem, and I don't remember the name of the form, but it takes the lines from another poem and uses them as the last line in each stanza. And the poem I chose is small enough that it's mostly complete within my poem, but I'll read the inspiring poem first. Make of Yourself a Light, which is by Hannah Wilson. The poem says, the Buddha said, make of yourself a light. That is all. I am relieved of the need to be good, to be wise, to be other. All I need do is walk ahead so my children can see in the dark. New mother reading. We have been here past an hour, a book in my hand, the weight of my son's head warming the crook of my arm, his mouth slack against my breast, breathing inaudible. On the page, the poem says, the Buddha said, make of yourself a light. The light has shifted to gray, but I'm anchored, the switch for the lamps out of reach. Downstairs, someone is tending a shop, bagging fruit, making change. For now, I am absolved of that kind of work. My job, love. That is all. I am relieved of the need to be good. The need for milk wakens in him. Eyes closed, he searches with gums and tongue. Here is what I want for him. Ease in his body, buoy for a heart, splashes of laughter. To be wise, to be other. All I need do is walk ahead, the poem says. But I think next to for a good while, and later behind. For now, I feel milk release, hear the wet sounds of my son's working throat. He blinks and squints up at my face, as though it shines for him through the approaching dark. The picture I wake to every morning. They were in a rush, your brothers, having only allotted 5 days for this unplanned visit east, and with so much to do. Conversations with lawyers, condo to empty, a cremation to arrange. Your clothes, vintage, velvet, eyelets and voile and tulle, in bags at Goodwill so soon, I had to mourn that too, prospect of having something you'd worn against my own skin. Still, when they gave me the lotus you'd drawn in a single confident swoop, I forgave them, these kinsmen who were such strangers they introduced me at the service as your cousin, forgetting I was also theirs. They couldn't know that in 1986 I'd been your guest at the show by your East Village Japanese art class, where that flower, pulled too soon like you by the root, floated not in water, but on an otherwise blank white page. That was for my cousin Liz in memory. And this is Dear Advice Columnist, where she also appears along with other lost loved ones. Dear Advice Columnist, advise me. People keep dying. My coworker on vacation in Charlotte, aneurysm burst to the brain. My cousin, sitting inside a cell phone store. Yes, inside. That's not a typo. When a car crashed through the plate glass window, mowing right over her small, strong dancer's body as she waited her turn. Before that, my brother-in-law with the dubious honor of saying goodbye to functions one after another after another. Goodbye walking, bye-bye holding a spoon, sayonara speech, all in the rapid-fire way ALS decrees. As for my immediate family, cancer, hep C cancer, victim of a murder. Dear Advice Columnist, dear me, how do I get the remaining people I love to outlive me without exiting too soon myself? Stop the world, advice giver, or is it the clock? I want to stay, but only if you stay with me. Not you, per se, figment who can never answer this letter, but you, and you, and you, and you. This is in Sycamore Park. A narrow path overseen by a few metal benches leads to the massive wonder this place is named for. Limbs the size of trunks and a plaque that dates it back to 1650. Today, beneath that great latticework of shade, my friends discuss what is known about the communal network of roots. Even a stump, otherwise dead, still shares what it has with the group. Meanwhile, my own stingy core keeps replaying a moment on the phone this morning. Jean sniping in a way that was so old and familiar, it stung me to silence. Same tone, same words, I swear, as in that first summer when I was 18 and enthralled with her. Now I'm nearly 60. She's newly widowed, and as she fingers the mottled bark, I half think it must be illegal to be pissed at a friend, no, a sister with a grief that fresh. And yet, as Sue explains how fungi are the brains underground, my mind goes from fungus to fester. How do botanists date trees, Lisa asks, when they can't see the rings? I shrug and glance at the gold band that links Jean to an absence, then hug my thickening middle. And with it, the girl I was, who always assumed whenever someone was so much as brusque, it was somehow her fault. I can't get over this thing, I say, wanting to mean the sycamore. All it has felt in its almost 400 years. All it must know and have forgiven. This is a poem that was in Word Gathering, and Diane Weiner, our esteemed editor of Word Gathering, is here. So I'll dedicate this to Diane. Today I've been declared a dancer. me with my strolling pace and tilting step, but also the kids with hinges and metal hips, the girls on wheels, and all those with missing digits. It's a street fair, and it's ours. We who were born dancing freeform as we figured our way from place to place. No choreographer, no river dance, no one but us moving how we move. Just now the trees with their scribble of uneven branches shake their leaves like fans and boas, none of them the color of envy, none of us trying and failing to imitate you. It's also for my CP sisters. I see you there, Leslie. Um, and I'm going to end with two short, kind of political poems because how can I not with what we're heading towards? At breakfast, fear sets up house in the folds of your long intestine, while anxiety eats its own thin arm and puts on its paper shoes. This is what comes from listening to the news. Revenge has hijacked another November, without shame's metallic tinfoil taste, or the stop and think that wears your mother's face. All you can do is seek a more benign station, where Motown might bring you back to Grove Street and the old pink teacup, and red is in love with your dumb swollen heart. And this is my Chihuahua is now president. She's done with all the talk, she says, from the Oval Office of her dog bed. Full bellies are what matter. Gentle touch, cooing sounds approximating song. Love the Manx on the windowsill, the drowsy human who only just thought to give you water, the dexterous squirrel outside. There isn't a Bible that says otherwise, no matter how many feet you're standing on. Words, she says again, in case you missed it, aren't as crucial as everyone claims. Be generous with what falls from your table. Watch where you step. Be kind. Thank you so much.
Wow, Ona, that was an amazing reading. Thank you. Lots of one art poems in there. Makes me very happy. So if people weren't aware before, now they know about Ona's amazing talent. And alarmingly, she can do this in other forms as well. So definitely check out Ona's website, and you can see where you can, check out her prose writing, which is also stunning. So next up, our second reader is Heather Swan. And let me tell you a little bit about Heather. So Heather Swan is a poet and nonfiction writer. Her poets, her poems have appeared in such journals as The Hopper, One Art, Terrain, Poet Lore, Phoebe, The Raleigh Review, and Cold Mountain. Her most recent collection, Dandelion, was released from Terrapin Books in 2023. Her first book, A Kinship with Ash, also Terrapin Books, published in 2020, and a finalist in the ASLE Book Award and the Julie Suk Award. Her nonfiction book, Where Honeybees Thrive, is from Penn State Press and won the Sigurd F. Olson Nature Writing Award. A companion book, Where the Grass Still Sings, Stories of Insects and Interconnection, was published in 2024. Heather has been recipient of the August Derleth Poetry Award, the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets Best Chapbook Award, Wisconsin Center for the Book Bookmark Award, and Martha Meyer Renk Fellowship in Poetry at UW Madison, and an Illinois Arts Council Poetry Fellowship Award. She teaches environmental literature and writing at UW Madison. And let me share a couple from One Art. Heather was among One Art's most read poets of 2021 and 2023. And in 2021, we nominated Heather's poem On the Day You Left This World for the Pushcart Prize, This poem was, in fact, also One Art's most read poem of 2021, and I'll drop a link in the chat where you can see some of Heather's work in One Art. So thank you, Heather, for being with us.
Thank you, Mark. It's really such an honor to be here. Thank you all for coming on a Sunday afternoon to celebrate the new year. I'm very lucky to be reading with Ona and Rosemary. I also want to say a thank you to Louisa, who's also a huge part of making One Art happen. So thank you. Thank you all very much. I think I'll start by reading a poem that I wrote, gosh, quite a while ago now. It's in my first book, Kinship with Ash. My mother's a potter, and we had, like many do, lots of difficulty to work through when we were kids. And she was a single mom, and she told me this message about pottery, and it made its way into a poem. And I didn't realize at the time that this message would be a message that like lasted my entire life. And it's about it's about a process called in Japanese they call it kintsugi. And so anyway, back in like I guess probably 2007, I wrote this poem, and it's called Bowl, and it's from my mother. From the mud in her hands, the bowl was born. Opening like a flower in an arch of petals, it became a vessel both empty and full. Later, in the kiln, it was ravaged by fire, its surface etched and vitrified, searing the glaze into glass as its body turned to stone. It is at the edge of damage that beauty is honed. And in Japan, the potter tells me, when a tea bowl cracks in the fire, that crack is filled with gold. My life had many cracks, and so so that's an important one for me. But it's continued to sort of be a message for me in so many ways. And I realized that this message that she had actually came partly from my grandfather. And one of the poems that was published very recently in One Art was a poem about a story that she told us about my grandfather and how he had to sort of cling to the beauty in the world to get through all the difficulty. And so I'll just read this poem that was published first in One Art. It's called Your Grandfather Loved Birds, my mother said. In the dark, he'd wake his daughters and lead them to the pickup truck, hand them hot cocos, and drive them to the edge of the arboretum to find birds they didn't know the names of, that he needed, like stitches to hold his day together, bright bits of halcyon beauty. This, rather than fold under the weight of the war he had endured, while the others in his ski troop died in the same room he had to hide in to survive. So many days with their bodies disappearing until finally someone came for him. As girls, they did not understand this need to get there at first light, to hear that fabric of song. Years later, when they poured birdseed into feeders to invite the brightness, the flight, the miracles, they understood. It is worth it, despite the horror, to be alive another day. So growing up, knowing that life could be difficult, made it really complicated when you have a child and you want the child to fall in love with it. And this poem is really about trying to navigate that experience of feeling so aware of all the suffering and the difficulty in the world, and also the miracles. So this is a poem that I wrote for my children called On Breaking. Those early days when you were small enough to carry, my entire life curled around you like a nautilus. You were separate but not severed. Never have I been so raw, child, as I felt bringing you into this world of both violets and beheadings. How can we remain open? What choice do we have but to don our armor in order to go forth each day? But to be most alive, We must be willing to be broken over and over, to keep our palms open, those muscles in our chests unbarbed in whatever body we're given. So may you open like the orchid, my child, I beseech you. The wind blows, the leaves fall. There is no compass but love. One of the things that I don't often read when I'm in readings like this, but I think I'll read it because I spend a lot of my life thinking about the planet and how I am part of the things that I worry about. I'm part of the problem. I worry about how much plastic is in the oceans, and I worry about this, the amount of carbon that's in the atmosphere and so on. And there was a day when I was thinking, okay, if I was really going to get rid of everything that I was, within which I found complicity, what would that look like? And so in this moment of like New Year's resolutions, I'll read this poem. And of course it's impossible to do this, but I also started thinking like, to even just say it out loud allows me to recognize that I could do better. So here's this poem called In Which I Begin to Bargain. For my plastic water bottle, the albatross. For my 4-lane, seeds unbound. For my cotton quilt, the many years of backs, the many years of hands. For my wireless, some silence. For my tortilla chips, the fields of daisies, the fields of Queen Anne's lace. And for my gas cap, the polar bear, the harbor seal, the tern. For my thermostat, the mountaintops of Kentucky and West Virginia. And for my perfect lawn, frogs. For my insecticide, the songbird's eggs, the butterflies, the bees. And for my fossil fuel, the fossils, the strata undisturbed. For my palm oil, the orangutan. For my mascara, the rabbits, the mice. And for my smartphone, Congo. For my blue jeans, the seamstresses and their eyes, their children, their hands. For my many myths, the crows, the bats, the rattlesnakes, the spiders. For my jet plane, the coral reef, the mollusks of many shapes. And for my mirror, skies. I think I'll read another poem that was first published in One Art. And this is a poem that I wrote after losing my father. And it was such an important experience for me when I lost my dad to go outside, to spend more time in the natural world. It was in the middle of COVID. And as Ona so beautifully wrote about, it was such a time of isolation. And so I couldn't find the community I needed among people, but I found it among the other beings. And so I'll just read that poem. On the day after you left this world. Also, I will say that I'm in a kayak in this poem, which isn't really very clear. I wasn't just swimming. On the day after you left this world, I floated out to the island of bird bones, where their long gone voices now whisper in the cattails, looking for solitude, solace. But instead found 3 cranes waiting, who let me join them there on the shore. Night fell, and we stayed, all of us, cranes, crickets, cattails, my broken body breathing. And in the graying light, the breeze stroked the cool waters of the lake, the water lapping the soil until all of it was not separate. All of it became one breath. I think I'm going to read a poem. So that was from Dandelion. I think I'm going to read a poem, another poem from the first book, which is a true story. And it's one that I love to tell my students about, and just because it's shocking to them. But it's called Sleeping with Yaks. This is a true story. After climbing through rhododendron forests, over dizzying gorges on bridges made of rope, through villages where women made paper out of bark, next to Himalayan ice melt, past tiny stone stupas and countless fluttering prayer flags, to where the snow began and trees no longer grew, I came at dusk to a 2-room home. A family of Sherpas ushered me inside, handed me a bowl of boiled potatoes and a cup of hot butter tea, then invited me to stay the night. And after sitting in the glow of the fire, my body melting in the holy silence, the woman led me to an adjacent room where the family kept their yaks. A room not much larger than their 2 enormous bodies. And she shook out a mat on the floor near their heads, which were easily wider than my chest. Each of their ears was adorned with a pom-pom made of yarn, the red of Valentine's. The woman and I bowed goodnight to each other, and I was left alone with the yaks. We measured each other with our eyes. I blinked mine slowly in a kind of deference and waited for them to blink back. And then I folded myself down in the narrow space between the wall and their faces and rolled out my blanket under their whiskery chins. All night, as the cold mountains shifted under the stars, they held me in the warm halo of their sweet, even breath. They taught me more than I was kind of on an, searching for an enlightenment quest in that moment. And those yaks were the best teachers, to be honest. Let's see, I think I'm going to read 2 more poems. I'm going to read a poem that from Dandelion, which is about, it's actually about how I think as a poet all the time about everything being metaphor, like every word actually being a metaphor for the reality that we are living in, and that it's hard to actually say what we really want to say sometimes. And one of the really interesting things is when my daughter, this is really kind of a funny story. So when my daughter was learning to talk, I was trying to get her to, to get the words, you know what I mean? So she's under a tree and she's waving her arms back and forth and the wind is blowing on this beautiful maple tree. And I come running over and I go, wind, wind to her, which is like, destroying the experience for her. Like as a poet, all you want is for somebody to go out and just, experience wind. So anyway, this poem is kind of about my own folly of trying to impose language on things sometimes in ways that feel kind of maybe limiting. Called Metaphor. Beneath the maple, the child lifts her hands and becomes gossamer while a stream of air comes through her lips. Breathe, someone says. Then her fingers press against a green flatness with ridges, first to her palm, then to her cheek. Leaf, someone says. Above, watch as the trees articulate wind, allowing it wholly in, and how birds so easily navigate the chaos of branch and leaf. How unequipped we are, intent on naming things, making maps, and how small our window, how very small. But look, the child has discovered a nectarine in a bowl by the open door, and through its sweetness spills glossolalia. So that's really a poem about not being able to write a poem, not being able to say the right words. All right, I think I'll just read this last poem. In this poem, I wrote on a day exactly like today. In Madison, it's 10 degrees. It's been gray for days and days. But luckily right now we have ice, which is kind of actually sometimes rare at this time of the world. And what happened was I was feeling very down and I was walking by the edge of the lake and it was very gray. And at the edge of the lake, sometimes because of the, the way that the temperature changes, ice will break and then build up in sort of like piles of, sort of shards and so on. And I was walking there and suddenly a beam of sunlight came down through the clouds and lit up this, sort of illuminated this ice. And this is the poem that I wrote about that. And I just want to say thank you all very much again for giving me the time. It's called Gleam. In the same way ice carries light, by which I mean changed, intensified, by which I mean kaleidoscopic or transformed, by which I mean a suddenly visible spectrum from violet to cerulean to rose, this body, by which I mean this thorax, this spine, this skin, carries awareness. This being These beings, by which I mean all, by which I mean carp, antelope, lichen, and birds, the lightest of all, who live on wind, are allowed to bear witness to gravity, to iron, to calcium and blood, and to the shimmer of rime ice, the glint of gold on a honeybee wing, to the flint of a lover's eyes, this gleam of late afternoon sun, and to witness also fists and teeth, breakage and war, so briefly, so very briefly, by which I mean death, by which I mean you may shine before the end.
Wow, thank you, Heather. That was an amazing reading. So much. The wise yaks. We're learning a lot here. And I'm just thinking from some of what you're saying, it's really puts wintry, and oh, that's a big one. Is it, wintry weather, or I don't know, there's always some debate over that, the phrasing. But just kind of being able to enjoy colder weather is something that I've always struggled with. And so some of us are on the East Coast where it tends to not get particularly extreme, or at least in the Pennsylvania part. And certainly increasingly seems to be getting less extreme. And then Heather and Rosemary are in places where it certainly gets colder. And I feel like you're both very good at finding the positive aspects of that. So I find that very impressive personally. There was a good NPR Life Kit episode recently interviewing someone with a new book out. Um, I'm gonna get it wrong, but it's like something about like how to winter. And if you look it up, it looks super good. But thank you, that was incredible. And I forgot to mention earlier on in the reading that um, if you want to stick around a little bit after, for about half an hour after Rosemary's reading, we're gonna open it up for a bit of discussion. So we'll have a little bit of moderated kind of Q&A if anyone has burning questions that they'd like answered by our readers. So without further ado, our third and final reader, certainly last but not least, is Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer. And Rosemary Rosemary served as the first poet laureate of San Miguel County, Colorado from 2007 to 2011, and was named Poet Laureate of Colorado's Western Slope by the Telluride Institute from 2015 to 17. She is a devoted literary citizen, co-hosts Emerging Form, a podcast on creative process, and is co-founder of Secret Agents of Change, also co-leader of the Soul Writers Circle. Also, I know there's, I'm forgetting exactly. Rosemary can tell you what the deal is with the Ritual app in a moment. Rosemary is the author of 13 collections of poetry. She has a new collection out recently that she can tell you about. Collections also include All the Honey, Hush, Naked for Tea, and her poems have appeared in O Magazine, A Prairie Home Companion, PBS NewsHour, American Life and Poetry. Rosemary has certainly been a fairly regular contributor to One Art, which makes me very happy. She's won a few prizes that are quite notable, including being a 3-time winner of Rattle's Ekphrastic Challenge. She's also been in numerous anthologies that are personal favorites of mine. This includes The Poetry of Presence, which is an anthology of mindfulness poems edited by Phyllis Colday and Ruby R. Wilson. Also, James Cruz's anthologies, How to Love the World and The Path to Kindness. Rosemary writes and shares a poem a day on her blog, 100 Falling Veils. And as far as One Art specific accolades, we nominated Rosemary's poem In Times of Great Darkness for the Pushcart Prize in 2020, and she has consistently excuse me, been the #1 or #2 spot on OneArt's most read poets since the journal's inception. Since I appear to be losing my voice slightly, I'm going to pass it over to Rosemerry and put a couple links in the chat, and you can learn more about Rosemerry on her website. Thank you for being here, Rosemerry.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Louisa. Thanks, Heather and Ona. It occurs to me you did do a nice job in some ways, just creating this bouquet of 3 mothers, all of us writing quite a bit about what it is to raise children in this world. And so I thought maybe I'd start with a poem about apocalypse by someone we all recognize, Robert Frost, but pair it with a song that comes from West Africa, the Yoruban people. And the song says something like, "That which has been created can never be destroyed." And I kind of love weaving that message with fire and ice. Ishe Oluwa. Some say the world will end in fire. Koleba Sheyahu. Some say in ice. Ishe Oluwa. And from what I have tasted of desire, Koleba Sheyahu. Oh, I hold with those who favor fire. Koleba Sheyahu. But if it had to perish twice, Koleba Sheyahu. Well, I think I've seen enough of hate. Ishe Oluwa. To know that for destruction, ice is also great. Koleba Sheyahu. And would suffice. Ishe Oluwa. Koleba Sheyahu. That which has been created can never be destroyed. How I long for that to be true. It's something I long to believe in. It doesn't necessarily mean it won't be recreated. It just won't be destroyed. And I think about that transformation, that alchemy. I think that's a big part of what poetry does for me, for all of us, is it does help us to take difficult, untenable situations, and through our own imagination, through all of the other poets that we've read and loved, through all of the experiences we've had, then we recreate them as art. And that is part of the alchemy. That is part of the promise of that song. So I've completely changed everything I thought I would do today. Whatever I thought I'd read, I don't know. I don't even know if any of them are the same as when I showed up here an hour ago. Just thinking about what Ona and Heather have read and thinking about OneArt. And so I'm going to start with one of the first poems. I think it's the first poem that I had published in OneArt quite a while ago, probably like in 2019 or something like that, 2020. It was a while ago. So this is called After the Tortoise Won the Race. It was the strangest thing. She had never cared before about winning. Life had been about basking in the sun at the entrance to her burrow. Sometimes, when she was warm enough, she'd plod off in search of leaves, and now she thought of finish lines. The feel of the ribbon on her prehistoric nose, the roar of the crowd as she crossed. They say tortoises don't have feelings, no hippocampus in their small brains, but she felt it, the tug of success. She spent decades looking for another race. She had a chance to win. None of her friends could understand. Come, dig in the sandy soil, they said. But it wasn't enough anymore. She wished she'd never said yes to that race. She wished she could race the hare again tonight. She wished she could stop defining her life by that one moment, wished she could stop wishing for any life beyond the life she had now. Sleeping in her burrow, cool and moist, wished with wished that all she wanted were soft weeds and longleaf pines. Oh, she wished she could hear that crowd just one more time. Right? Right. Isn't it interesting how we define our lives by these stories? This is another reason I love poetry so much is one, it just helps us to play. You can do this at home too, by the way, just, you know, when they always say, do not try this at home. Actually do try this at home. Take any fable or any story and just rewrite it, put yourself into it and wonder how else it could have gone, or what if you were the tortoise in that story? Or what if you were that crow dropping those petals? And what does that have to teach you now? So I want to get emotional and thank One Art because, and this is actually really specifically you, Mark, because after my son died 3 years ago, Mark sent me a note and he said, hey, what if we put some of these poems in that you're writing about your son, and what is there a special day we could do it? And we did it for his birthday, and that meant so much to me. Mark, thank you for that. I'll read a couple more then that are in another couple that were in One Art that are in All the Honey, which came out a couple years ago. This is In the Garden Again. And it's kind of resonant, really, I think, with that line of yours, Heather, that you read that was something like, I even commented on it. What was it? It's like, where is it? I'm scrolling back. Oh, I don't, you'll hear it. You'll hear the resonance. This is called In the Garden Again. After breaking, after kneeling, after raising my ripe fist, after opening my palm, after clenching it again, after running, after hiding, after taking off my masks, after stilling, after shouting, after bargaining with God, after crumpling and cursing, after losing, after song, after seeking, after breath, after breath, after breath, I stand in the sunflowers of early September and watch as the bees weave from one giant bloom to another, and I too am sunflower, tall stemmed and face lifted, shaped by the love of light and the need for rain. I stand here until some part of me is again more woman than sunflower, and she notices how, for a few moments, it was enough just to be alive. Just to be alive. It was enough. And this one, thanks for printing this one too, Mark. This is called Revival, and it has an epigraph from Mirabai Starr, such a beautiful, talented human being. So incredible how she actually has a gorgeous grief community. If anybody is interested in exploring grief with other people, it's called Holy Lament. But this poem begins with this epigraph from Mirabai. The day your son died, the person you were died too. And this is Revival. Death came to her as a blue sky day, as a feral scream, as an ambulance with no need for its siren. Death came to her saying, ma'am, you don't want to see your son this way. Death knew what it was doing when it erased everything she thought she knew about how to meet a day, when it scraped her of who she had been and left her half barren. It was habit that made her brush her teeth, routine that helped her drive the car. but it was life itself that inspirited her, slipping like starlight into her every dark cell, life itself that whispered to her death-bent heart, "You are not done yet with your loving." You are not done yet with your loving. What a thing to know. I'm going to break out of it just a little bit to from reading one art poems to one that I wrote. I think many of you receive my daily poems, but if you don't, I do a crazy thing where I write a poem every day and then put it into the world every day. First drafts, what a weirdo. And I love this too, because to me, I'm so deeply in love with the process of poems, with how they rise up. And I love sharing how raw that can be, as opposed to something strangely perfect. I don't need it to be perfect. I don't want it to be perfect. And here's a poem about things that are really not perfect. I was reciting poems, and I love reciting poems for memory. Maybe some of you do too. When I fall in love with a poem, I just recite it again and again and invite it into my body. And there was a group of us just before Christmas who were sitting around, and we were trying to remember Hopkins. Gerard Manley Hopkins, one of my favorite poets, has a poem that begins, "I watched this morning, morning's minion, kingdom of daylight's Dauphin." And we all knew it a little, and we all stuttered through this poem, just doing the very best we can. And part of what made me think about reciting this poem for you is that it's written, by the way, in blank verse, which is unrhymed iambic pentameter. I made it a sonnet, so it is 14 lines, but it isn't rhymed. So just thinking about your class coming up, Mark, and just how much fun it is to write with a little constriction. Writing in blank verse and unrhymed iambic pentameter is one of my favorite things to do. So this here is Reciting Hopkins by heart with Peter and Gabriel. The first few words we all knew well, but then we stumbled, stuttered, reached for precious lines, our halting voices so unlike the smooth and sweeping Windover that Hopkins wrote about. And still, despite our bumbling, despite our clumsy starts and awkward spurts, an ecstasy of plume still winged through our attempts. The language sang, its embers glowed, its music stirred vermilion, and our eyes were shining too. No wonder of it, even plowing fields can make the soil gleam. With love, we plowed that sonnet's lines until they shined, until the air between us plumed and swooped, until we too were shining. That goes along with your gleam too, Heather. And forgive me for 1 second. I really wanted to read this poem that Mark mentioned, and then I didn't find it. And it's the poem about In Times of Great Darkness. And it goes along with Ona's kind of invitation to us, be kind. So just a moment while I look. It's in this book somewhere. I just need a second to find it. Oh, come on. All right, maybe I'm gonna have to give up on it. Mark, would you do me a favor? Will you find it in OneArt and you can put it?
Wait, Rosemary, remind me of the name.
In Times of Great Darkness. All right, while he's doing that, I'll read this one, also published in OneArt, called Choosing the Sorrow. And it's interesting. I'll just say to introduce it that I think what we're called to more than anything is something that poems teach us, is how to open up to all of it, to things that deeply hurt and to things that bring us the most incredible joy. And a poem does that. And I think because a poem can do it, it becomes a teacher to us for how to do it. And in this way, I feel like living a poetic life is that willingness to show up and be present to what is here, to let it shape us, to know that we also shape it. We don't change it, but we can change the way we meet it. So this poem is about how am I going to meet sorrow, choosing the sorrow. In my heart today, a river of love for you. Sparkling, clear, easy to wade in. Some may not understand why I sometimes reach down to pick up a smooth stone of sorrow. Not because I have stumbled on it, but because I want to know its weight again. I search beneath the glossy currents, and always I find what I seek. There are thousands of such stones, enough to cover the whole riverbed. Every one of them precious, every one of them a memory of how it was to love you when you were alive. Stone of you waking in your crib, pointing to light. Stone of you doing tricks on your bike. Stone of hiking up cliffs, stone of dishes undone, stone of your eyes, stone of long fingers, stone of you whistling across the room. The river of love is no less powerful for all this sorrow. When I am still, often I choose to go waiting here. I notice how beautiful they are. All these stones, worn as they are by the currents of love. I notice how the current never stops. Choosing sorrow, what a strange thing, right? To choose that. Oh, good. I think Mark found the poem for me. Thank you, friend. Oh, no, it didn't take me to the right spot. Well, I'll do this one though. This is
Rosemary, in the chat, people are also saying it's page 59.
you, friends. Okay, there we go. Thank you. I appreciate the assist. So this is in times of great darkness, speaking, I guess, to Ona's be kind. And also, it happens that I wrote this for Paula Lepp, who's here today. Hi, Paula Lepp. In times of great darkness, I want to do for you what the sun does for me. Coax you to come outside, to breathe in the golden air. I want to warm you and enter you, fill you with brilliance, make your muscles melt, make your mind shush. I want to prepare for you luminous paths that span across deep space. Thaw any part of you that feels frozen, find any cracks, and slip shine into them. I want to intensify your shadow so you might better know your own shape. I want to encourage you to open wider, wider. Want to teach you to write your own name in light. And I'll close with this one that was just in One Art, I think for Christmas Eve. This is called When We Greet Each Other. Oh, it's for when we greet each other. And I guess before I read it, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much, friends. Thank you for showing up to listen to me, to Heather, to Ona. Thanks again to One Art. I saw so many names of other people who I know in the participants list because of One Art. One Art really is an incredible community building platform. Gosh, that just sounds so formal and stuff. It's a gorgeous community. That's what it is. It's a gorgeous community. And I thank you, Mark and Louisa, for creating it, for inviting us all. I want to thank every single person who writes poems and submits them there. I read them, I share them, I love them. And I also want to thank all the people who comment on each other's poems. What a gift it is when we engage in that. So thank you, everyone. So this is for when we greet each other. I want a new ritual for when we meet each other, strangers or beloveds, friends or rivals, elders or children. It begins by holding each other's eyes, the way we behold sunrises or the first cherry blooms, which is to say, we assume we'll find beauty there. And perhaps some display of open hands, a gesture with palms up that suggests both, I offer myself to you, and I receive you. There should be a quiet in which we hear each other breathe, knowing it's the sound of the ocean inside us. If there are words at all, let them be formed mostly of vowels, so they're heard more as song than as spitting, more like river current and less like throwing stones. Words that mean something like, I do not know what you carry, but in this moment, I will help you carry it. Or something like, everything depends on us treating each other well. And if we said it enough, perhaps we would believe it. And if we believed it enough, perhaps we'd live it, treating every other human like someone who holds our very existence in their hands, like someone whose life has been given to us to serve, even if it's only to walk together safely down the street, hold a door, pass the salt, share a sunset, offer a smile, and say with our actions, you belong. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosemerry. You're an incredible force for creating an ambiance that's hard for me to even put my finger on. It's very special, and I'm sure anyone who spends time with you has said something along those lines. That it's very unique to engage in your presence. So thank you so much. That was a beautiful reading, and you know, that means a lot to me, and what you shared means a lot. And I love having you as part of the One Art community. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Rosemerry. Thank you, Ona. Thank you, Heather. And I am going to, I guess, wrap up the formal part of today's reading. But please, I hope you'll stick around a little bit and consider engaging in a bit of community time